J Talks Radio.
Okay, so we're diving into this idea of renewing your mind. People throw that phrase around a lot, especially in faith circles, but what's the actual meaning beyond just like thinking positive?
Right. It's more just a slapping on a happy face.
Exactly. So how does this renewing actually play out in everyday life? We're taking a deep dive into a conversation between podcast host Jay and another host to really unpack this. What struck me was how Jay takes it beyond just behavior modification,
It's interesting, isn't it? She goes deeper than just doing the right things.
Totally. It's about getting to the core of where our actions come from, those underlying thoughts and beliefs.
And that's where things get really fascinating. Points out that aligning our thinking with our faith, it's not a one-time thing. It's active, it's ongoing. She even calls it a daily battle.
A daily battle. Okay, that sounds kind of intense. Paint me a picture. What does that even look like in practice?
Well, think about it. We're constantly bombarded with information, right? Media, culture, even our own past experiences, all these voices and messages coming at us.
And not all of them are helpful, that's for sure.
Exactly. And Jay uses this powerful analogy of a battlefield. It's like there's this constant battle going on in our minds because those messages, they can clash with a faith-based worldview.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like those messages can plant seeds of doubt or fear if we're not careful.
Exactly. So renewing your mind, in a way, it's about actively combating those negative or conflicting thoughts and replacing them with
something stronger? Right. That's where faith comes in. Yeah.
Yes. But points out, it's not just about passively reading scripture. It's about really letting those truths sink in deep, letting them impact your thinking.
So it's not enough to just have those truths in our heads somewhere. We have to actually internalize them.
Exactly. It's about actively using prayer, specifically targeting those areas where you might be struggling.
Okay, I like that, being strategic. So if it's a battle, we need the right weapons. Does she give any specific examples of what that looks like?
Well, absolutely. So let's say you're struggling with fear, a pretty common one, right? Instead of letting that fear control you, she suggests finding verses that specifically address fear and really meditating on them. One she uses is from 2 Timothy. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind.
Wow, that's powerful. Just repeating those words, letting them sink in, I can see how that would start to shift something internally.
It's about replacing that fear with truth. Jay emphasizes that consistently using these tools, like scripture and prayer, it can actually transform your thought patterns over time.
So it's like building mental muscle memory, but with these truths. I'm starting to see how this renewing is not a one-time thing, but an ongoing process.
It really is. And just like with physical exercise, having a support system makes a world of difference. Jay talks about the importance of community, surrounding yourself with people who reinforce those positive, faith-filled thoughts. It makes a huge difference.
That makes sense. We're meant to help each other grow, right? But what happens on the flip side? If someone doesn't make time for this renewing, what did Jay say about that?
Well, that's where it gets really interesting. Jay highlights how neglecting this process can actually make us vulnerable to anxiety, to negative thought patterns, even to falling back into behaviors that we're trying to avoid.
It's like our minds can become like gardens, right? If we don't tend to them, the weeds can take over.
That's a great analogy. Without that intentional renewing, things can get messy.
So there are real consequences to not tending to our thought life. Okay, that's kind of sobering, but also encouraging, right? Because it means we're not stuck. We have the power to actually change things.
Exactly. And it's really fascinating. Jade connects this idea of spiritual discipline, this renewing your mind, to what psychologists call cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
Oh, yeah, CBT, I've heard of that. It's a way to help people change their thinking, right?
Yeah.
But I never thought about it in connection to faith before.
Right. But it's so interesting when you put them side by side. Both renewing your mind through faith and CBT, they both involve recognizing those negative thought patterns and then actively working to change them.
So they have a similar goal, even if they come from different starting points.
Yes. Of course, with faith, you have the foundation of belief in God, and CBT is a more clinical approach. But that goal of achieving a healthier, more positive mental state, that's something they definitely share.
So it's like those therapy techniques, they have roots in these ancient ideas about spiritual growth. Being both a mom and someone who really thinks deeply about this stuff, she makes that connection so clear.
Totally. She really breaks it down. For example, you know how in CBT there's this technique of challenging negative thoughts, like putting them up against evidence? You would say that's where scripture comes in. You're combating those lies, as she calls them, with God's truth.
Oh, I love that. Like holding up a mirror to those negative thoughts, but the reflection is truth.
Yes, and that's what's so powerful about it.
Okay, so Jay makes this whole renewing your mind thing make a lot more sense, but it still feels, I don't know, kind of overwhelming. Where would someone even begin?
That's such a good point. It can feel like a lot, right? But Jay, her big thing is honesty. She says the first step is just acknowledging those specific thoughts you're wrestling with, whatever they are, no matter how embarrassing, no matter how difficult.
Wow, so just naming them, that takes a lot of courage sometimes.
It really does.
Yeah.
And it's so important. Don't try to shove them down or pretend they're not there.
Okay, so step one, face those thoughts head on. Then what? What do we do with them once we've acknowledged them?
That's where those tools we were talking about come in. Scripture, prayer, that support system. Jay suggests actively searching for verses in the Bible that speak directly to the areas where you're struggling. So if you're dealing with insecurity, find those verses about God's love for you. If it's anger, go to those passages about forgiveness and patience.
It's about finding the right tool for the job, like a spiritual prescription.
Yes.
I love that. So we identify the negative thought, we combat it with truth from Scripture. Anything else?
Oh, and prayer. Don't underestimate the power of prayer. It's about taking those thoughts to God. Jay emphasizes it's not just about saying the words, it's about really pouring out your heart, being honest with him, asking for his help to change those thought patterns.
So we're not alone in those thoughts, we bring God into it.
Yes. And we're also not meant to go through this alone, period. Jay's a big advocate for finding support from others, from your community, whether that's a pastor, a counselor, a close friend, someone you trust who can offer encouragement, maybe a little bit of accountability too.
Like a workout buddy, but for your mind.
Yes, exactly. Someone to cheer you on and help you stay on track when it gets tough. And just like with exercise, consistency is key.
Small steps, but done consistently. That's how we see real change, right?
Yes. Jay encourages listeners to be patient with themselves, to embrace the fact that this is a journey. It's not an overnight fix. It takes time, it takes effort, but that transformation is possible.
So renewing your mind, it's this lifelong pursuit. It's not about arriving at some destination of perfect thinking. It's about this ongoing process of growth.
Exactly. It's about aligning ourselves with something bigger than ourselves. And I think that's what's so encouraging about Jay's message. It's not about being perfect. It's about taking those small, consistent steps day by day to shift your focus, to challenge your thinking, to invite God's truth into your life more and more.
It's a process of becoming more who we were created to be. I love that. It really is about the journey, isn't it? And realizing that we're not defined by those negative thoughts.
Exactly. That's something Jay emphasizes throughout the whole conversation. We will face challenges, we will have negative thoughts, and that's just part of being human, right?
It's so easy to forget that sometimes. We can be so hard on ourselves.
Right. But what I love about Jay's approach, it's so realistic. She's not saying those thoughts will magically disappear, but that we don't have to be ruled by them. We have the power to choose something different.
To renew our minds and experience true freedom. It's really powerful when you think about it.
It is. And she tells this story that I think brings it all home about her own struggles with anxiety.
Oh, wow. So even Jay, who seems to have it all together, she battles with anxiety too.
Yeah. She talks about how she used to let those anxious thoughts just spiral.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's like you get caught in this loop of worry and you can't escape it.
Exactly. But then she started really putting these principles into practice.
Yeah.
Actively challenging those thoughts with Scripture, praying for peace, really leaning on her support system, all the things we've been talking about.
And what happened?
Well, she's very honest about the fact that it wasn't some magic overnight solution.
It rarely is, right? As much as we wish it were that easy.
Right. It took time, consistency, that willingness to trust the process. But gradually, she started to notice a shift. The anxiety didn't go away completely, but she was able to handle it differently. It wasn't this constant battle in her mind anymore. She found peace. She found strength.
Wow, that's so encouraging to hear. It makes this whole idea of renewing your mind feel a lot more attainable, Like, if Jay can do it, maybe there's hope for me.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of her message. It's both challenging and incredibly encouraging. It's a call to action, to really examine our thought patterns and take responsibility for the state of our minds. But it's also this beautiful reminder that we're not alone in that. We have the tools, we have the support, and we have the power within us through faith to experience real transformation.
This deep dive has honestly been so eye-opening. It's like we started feeling overwhelmed by all the negativity, but now we're ending on this note of empowerment. Like we can actually do something about it.
Yes. That's what I love about these conversations. They spark something in us.
They do. It's given me so much to think about, but more importantly, to put into practice.
That's what it's all about.
Well, on that note, this has been an amazing deep dive. To our listeners, if there's one thing to take away from this, renewing your mind, it's not a passive thing, it's an active pursuit. It's a lifelong journey, really, of aligning yourself with something so much greater than yourself. It takes effort, it takes intentionality, but the rewards, greater peace, joy, freedom, they're more than worth it. And remember, you're not alone in this. Seek out support, lean on your community, embrace the process, and trust that transformation is possible.
J Talks Radio.